I have to make all these excuses for her. This, like I said, all this was this week was people who said, "Oh, she ran a flawless campaign. How ridiculous!" Or it's sexism, it's racism. This is an old playbook.
Yes, I didn't say any of those things.
I know, but I've heard a lot of these things, and I think America's perfectly willing to elect a woman. They just didn't like the last two that were put up.
The vice president to Joe Biden, whether it was a male, female, black, white, or anything else, was going to have a giant political albatross around their neck, and they could perform perfectly or perform imperfectly. But that person was going to be at a disadvantage.
She didn't make a good case.
Well,
she didn't denounce the past stuff that people didn't like. She just
what would you
tried
do
to ignore
than Joe
it.
Biden?
I've been on that MSNBC, mate. It was propagandist nutcrackery on there. I went on a show called Morning Joe. It was absurd the way they carried on.
Good Morning Joe.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't know what it was. It wasn't morning. There was no one called Joe there. No one could concentrate. They didn't understand the basic tenets of journalism. No one was willing to stick up for genuine American heroes.
Bill Maher has recently been challenging the usual talking points of MSNBC guests on his show, and many viewers online have taken notice. These discussions have become increasingly uncomfortable for some guests, raising questions about whether Maher's platform is the right place for them. In this episode, one particular guest finds himself under intense scrutiny. What was said and why did it leave the guest struggling to respond? Let's take a closer look. And before we begin, remember to subscribe for more content like this.
Everything the candidates, especially the Democrats, do to get voters annoys them. The constant texting. Did you get the texts from Tim Walz every 5 minutes and always begging for money and knocking on doors? And we've got people knocking on doors. We don't want knocking on your door. Who in this day and age wants someone knocking on? Kids don't even like it when if you a phone call. That's like too much of a invasion of their privacy.
In this segment, Bill Maher directly challenges NBC journalist John Heilemann. Heilemann argues that Kamala Harris lost because her message failed to reach the right audience. Maher disagrees, saying the issue was not the message alone, but the platforms used to deliver it. Democrats relied heavily on traditional media outlets such as MSNBC and CNN, speaking mainly to audiences that already supported them. Meanwhile, Trump appeared on widely followed platforms like Joe Rogan's podcast, reaching voters outside the usual media bubble. When traditional strategies failed, Democrats increased direct outreach, which many voters found intrusive.
Emerge as the strongest Democratic opposition leader in the next Trump era. Oh, well, that's a good question. I mean, like Adam Schiff, he won right big. And
he won, but I like Wes Moore.
Wes Moore's fantastic. He's in Maryland.
Yep.
But who's going to be the one? Gavin Newsom, we have here in this state. He's already called the legislature to. Trump hasn't done anything yet, but I understand the.
This was the problem. There was a 2014 study that showed that Fortune 500 companies were more likely to pick a female CEO if the company was struggling, basically setting women up for the big job, but to also fail. If they did well, fine. But if they failed, look, we have a female CEO while failing. And that's what I feel like they did to Kamala Harris. When Biden refused to step aside and not run again, he was supposed to be that bridge. He backed off on that promise due to arrogance. And then he drops out after a catastrophic debate performance, and they set Kamala Harris up to fail.
Maher questions the idea that the message itself was flawless. Many voters were not persuaded by speeches or slogans. Instead, they looked at real-life conditions such as rising inflation, increasing crime, and border security issues. These were not abstract political topics, but everyday concerns. Voters made decisions based on personal experience, not messaging. Even with a different candidate, the outcome likely would not have changed because the message no longer connected with the public.
They set Kamala Harris up to fail. That was a 3-month campaign, and she was supposed to introduce herself to the American people. No wonder people were Googling, did Joe Biden drop out? And so...
No. No. You saying 3 months wasn't long enough? It was too long. It was long enough. It was long enough.
If they had a primary...
It's not that they didn't have time to introduce. They met someone and didn't like them.
Maher also points out that Democrats had many qualified candidates available. As noted by Michael Douglas, the party included experienced governors, senators, and national leaders. However, leadership choices focused more on identity than qualifications. The belief was that symbolic representation would guarantee voter support. Maher argues that voters care less about symbolism and more about leadership, competence, and results. This miscalculation contributed to the party's defeat.
The sitting vice president, and you get put elevated to the top of the ticket 107 days ahead of the election. I think that is a very high degree of difficulty put on anybody. And I do not think she is the perfect candidate. I tend to agree with Sarah that probably in a fully litigated primary, she probably would not have been the Democratic nominee, but will never know that. But I will tell you that, there's never been anybody who's had the difficulty of that situation, elevated that late in the campaign. Why?
Needed to run away from
Bill, I don't know
Biden
if you know this, but the Vice President of the United States is basically shoved in a broom closet for 3.5 years.
I know.
You couldn't.
She was more popular in there.
Yes, well.
I mean, it's this idea that in a mass media age, that 107 days is not long enough to know somebody.
You are way overestimating the American people in terms of what they're.
One of the most revealing moments occurs when John Heilman suggests that voters need more than 3 months to make informed decisions. Maher challenges this view, implying that it underestimates the intelligence of the American public. The suggestion that voters are unable to decide reflects a broader disconnect between media narratives and public reality. Many voters feel they understand the issues clearly and want leaders who respect their judgment.
Like Donald Trump has become a universally known, understood, loved by some, hated by others over the course of being omnipresent for 8 years.
Okay.
Barack Obama becomes president of the United States after running for 2 years as president, runs a 50-state primary, is on television, does dozens of Democratic debates. And by the time at the end of that, most people knew who he was. Most people.
Yeah.
You drop somebody in the middle of the top of the ticket, 3 days out, 3 months out, you are going to have to spend a lot of time trying to introduce yourself to the country while also being in a steel cage death match with Donald Trump.
Okay, but I don't know if you ever watched this show, but I had Michael Douglas on this week.
Yeah.
At the top, we were talking about this, and he made a very good point that every other country in the world can do it in months, sometimes weeks. Why can every other country do it in that short a period of time? Are they all so much brighter than America? I don't think so.
Maher compares the situation to other countries that conduct elections within much shorter time frames. He argues that Americans do not require constant guidance to form opinions. The election outcome reflected dissatisfaction with economic management, border policy, and national leadership. According to Maher, the result was not tied to a single candidate, but to widespread frustration with the administration as a whole.
I can believe that you could have shorter elections in America, but it's not like we don't know. In Britain, for instance, when you have a short election, it's not like you don't know who the leader of the party is for months and years before that.
John, you're either the person who's Googling the day before, did Biden drop out? Or in a week. Did anyone in this audience not know enough about Kamala Harris pretty much after a week to make a decision? Yeah, people. And it's ridiculous. We just get sicker of them.
Maher then asks his studio audience whether anyone feels they lack enough information to judge Kamala Harris. The silence that follows speaks volumes. No one responds. This moment directly challenges the argument that voters were uninformed. The lack of reaction suggests that voters were aware of Harris's positions and had already formed opinions based on that understanding.
Make all these excuses for her. Like I said, all this was this week was people who said, "Oh, she ran a flawless campaign. How ridiculous!" Or it's sexism, it's racism. This is an old playbook.
Yes, I didn't say any of those things.
I know, but I've heard a lot of these things, and I think America's perfectly willing to elect a woman. They just didn't like the last two that were put up.
There's some sexism. I'm not to elect a woman when she's the best candidate that they're offered. That's that simple.
I think they are not. I think they were very unlikely to elect whether the vice president to Joe Biden, who had a
that's it.
That's
what they didn't like.
The vice president to Joe Biden, whether it was a male, female, black, white, or anything else, was going to have a giant political albatross around their neck, and they could perform perfectly or perform imperfectly. But that person was going to be at a disadvantage.
She didn't make a good case.
Well,
she didn't denounce the past stuff that people didn't like. She just tried to ignore it.
Maher suggests that the outcome might have been different if Harris had focused more on widely shared concerns such as the economy, public safety, and cost of living, rather than divisive ideological positions. A more moderate approach, centered on practical solutions, may have attracted broader support. Maher is not alone in this criticism, as other commentators have raised similar concerns.
on that MSNBC, mate. It was propagandist nutcrackery
You
on
know how
there.
many-
I went on a show called Morning Joe. It was absurd the way they carried
Good
on.
morning, Joe.
Yeah,
That's
I
not
don't know
it.
what it was. It wasn't morning. There was no one called Joe there. No one could concentrate. They didn't understand the basic tenets of journalism. No one was willing to stick up for genuine American heroes.
The discussion concludes with criticism of major media outlets for refusing to accept voter rejection of their preferred narratives. Maher argues that protecting political messaging has taken priority over honest analysis. He presents his show as a place where these inconsistencies are openly addressed. The broader message is clear. Voters responded to real-world conditions, not media narratives, and ignoring that reality risks repeating the same mistakes.